Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. And if you like our shows, right off the top, we're just going to ask you to subscribe and hit the like button. I tend to forget that in the introduction, but I want to thank you for watching our show. And as usual, we're going to be talking a little bit about politics. And of course, we have a guest that is a candidate for New Hampshire State Senate in District 16. And I'd like to introduce you to Representative Barbara Griffin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you.
Well, I'm glad that you made it. And I know that you appeared on some of our other shows with Carl Seidel and,
yes.
and Dave Schoenman and myself as well in the past. So welcome back. And so you're running for state senate.
I am.
Yeah. So before we get into that, give me a little bit of your history. You know, you serve as a state representative.
Yes, and I think we have passed each other in the halls up there.
A few times?
I have been a state representative for the town of Goffstown for 4 sessions. Mm-hmm. So I'm finishing up my 8th year up there.
Wow.
And before that, I've been elected to various Goffstown boards for over 30 years, including the Board of Selectmen, Budget Committee, and other committees that are important for all our communities and making sure things get done for the citizens.
Yeah, so you have a good handle on basically how things work locally and on now statewide as well.
I think that local experience was really valuable going to the State House and addressing all of the issues that the State House has, because of course the issues in the State House are much more encompassing of issues throughout the state, and it's been helpful to understand how funding in communities works and how things happen in our town and city halls.
I think one thing that I learned as a state, well, not a state senator, but as a city councilor up in the Franklin area, years back, after stepping out, it was such a learning experience. Yeah. As you know, how things are funded, how things are voted on, zoning setbacks, being on zoning boards. It really is a free education. I mean, they give you a little stipend, but volunteer work can really help you understand the machinations of what's going on in your local community. And it seemed to be a common theme when we're deliberating. Everybody's saying, well, what's the state going to do? What's the state going to do? How is that going to affect our budget and how we operate? And getting up into the state, you say, well, this is how we're going to send some money back, and it's going to be up to your local representatives to divvy it out. And so it's a great learning experience, and so you have that in your background. So serving a few terms as a state representative, what committees did you serve on?
Over the course of the 4 years I've been on election law, I've been chair of the election law committee for 2 terms. Of course, I'm a Republican, and Democrats were in the majority one of those 4 terms, and in that case, they're the leadership of committees. I've served on Ways and Means, and I've served on Judiciary.
Interesting. So the first one that you mentioned, election law, that seems to be a hot topic these days.
It is a hot topic, and along with election law this past session, I was chair of the Special Committee on Redistricting. So there was a lot going on with elections this past session.
Yes, yeah, well, we got an earful about that. Any insight that you want to tell the viewers? Are you happy with the outcome?
In regards to redistricting, yeah. I think, we have a constitutional obligation to do that every 10 years.
Right.
And I think we got it done for the citizens of New Hampshire. There was some court involvement in our congressional districts that were established, but the reality is that in redistricting that is not entirely unusual. In fact, it's anticipated in bills that are drafted. Even in independent redistricting commissions, there are provisions for court involvement at the end of the process.
Right, yeah. And so you want it to be even-handed. And I think, having talked with Senator Gray, we really went as close to the letter of the law as possible and in the spirit of the laws. It's not easy. It's kind of ugly to do. You look at the map and you go, how did you get that? But I applaud you for all the work that you've done on that. That's a heavy lift. And voter integrity, that seems to be an issue these days. A lot of people were concerned about the election, and they want to make sure that they're fair.
Sure they do. I mean, elections are extremely important because they're how we get to even get to the position to do the job we want to do for our constituents. But people forget that there are some requirements for election. Sometimes people think, well, everybody can just vote. Well, the reality is there are some requirements, and there's the same requirements for everybody.
Right.
You need to be a United States citizen. You need to be over 18. Believe it or not, there is still debate today going on in various states over what age you should be.
Right.
Here in the state, we had a constitutional amendment. It got dropped from 21 to 18. You need to be who you are when you show up at the polls, which is why you're asked for your identification when you show up.
Just like at a bank.
Exactly. And when we passed that law, that was before I got up to the State House, when we passed the law that said if you don't have an ID establishing who you are, you get a picture taken. We heard a lot how that was going to suppress the vote. It didn't. The voting went up because the reality is that when people have confidence in the voting system, they're more willing to participate. And then finally, the thing that I think has people in New Hampshire particularly concerned about the vote is you need to be domiciled or reside in the place you vote, because we're a representative government, and you should be standing at the polls next to people who have the same interest in your community by virtue of geography, maybe not by political interest, but certainly by geography as you do.
Yeah, so they have some skin in the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're engaged in your community, and you want to participate and be vocal and with your vote. Yeah, and so I think a lot of people did come out, and in knowing that your votes count, it's not getting watered down, is important to the citizens, especially here in New Hampshire. Other issues that came up, it was really interesting towards the end, was parental rights. There was some issues about parental rights.
Oh, at the end of the session, there were a lot of those bills that at the end of the session come forward because the Senate and the House haven't been able to agree on the details, and there's this effort to sort of put things together. I think parental rights are incredibly important. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get it done, but I'm confident we can do it next session.
Yeah. What was the breakdown? Do you know? I don't know what happened. We figured that everybody was on board, and apparently some people stepped out of the room. Not pointing fingers, but it's like, what was the bill about?
Well, the bill is about what already exists. Mm-hmm. There's a constitutional right in New Hampshire recognized in court cases to be the parent to your children and to be that parent and make decisions about what your child does in every aspect of their life. Now, I'm not talking about parents who have been found by the court system to be legally unable to take care of their children. I've been an attorney for over 30 years. My practice was primarily family law, and I was involved in cases where parental rights were terminated or the Division of Children, Youth, and Families needed to get involved because of certain needs. Those are special circumstances, and they're an important part, but they're not the majority of families. The courts have said you have a right to be a parent for your child, and that should mean whether they're in your house or outside of your house. And I think as far as the bill went, when you've got that much focus on a bill that was many, many pages, it is hard to get everybody to agree on the details at that stage of the game.
Yeah, it really is. And, one of the things with the arguments against the bill, you always hear about the exceptions. Well, what if there's an abusive parent? Well, why does the abusive parent take away the rights from the good parent?
Well, and the other thing we're not realizing, or maybe we're beginning to realize, is over the course of the last years, our school counselors' role has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate in a way because they're assuming roles to deal with children in their lives outside of the school district. A school counseling degree is different than a counseling degree. It's a specific degree and course of study in conjunction with teaching certification. And so the training for that is different. I have a master's in social work. What I learned in that degree is different than what a counselor in a school program would learn. And the function of a school counselor years ago used to be to help the children function and get through the school day and work with the child and work with the parent if necessary to make sure kids were getting to school, they had what they needed in order to learn like we wanted them to. And unfortunately, just because of the pressures of society, what children bring to the school ground is not just educational worries. And I think that it's just been natural that the school has sort of assumed responsibility for all those roles. And we need to make sure that the school remembers parents are really the one that should be in charge of everything that happens in the school.
Yeah, and that's the local control that we support first is the parents' final say. You know, they're the gatekeepers. They're the ones, it's their children, right? Which brings up school choice, for me anyway. What are your thoughts about school choice?
I think school choice is an option that every parent should have for their children. And I'm not saying that every parent or every family would want school choice or it's appropriate. The reality is in New England, we're actually a little behind the ball game with school choice. If you go around the rest of the country, and I have family that lives in different parts of the country, they fund their schools on a county level. And so, and often, certainly at higher levels, but sometimes even in the elementary level, you have a choice to send your children to different schools within the district. So if, for example, there's a high school that has a particularly good program in an area that your child wants to learn, you have the option to send your child to that district because the funding is done at a completely different level than we do.
Right.
So when we fund at a local level, we need to understand that parents need options, and we have to work on doing it in a way that allows our communities to continue to function and parents to be able to use their dollars to educate their children in the way they want.
Yeah, we're hearing more and more people are learning about school choice and taking advantage of that. And you know, every kid learns differently, and if they want to go to a charter school that fits their little niche, it's not learning at that point. It's just fun. If you're doing something that you love, and you can learn at the same time, you're going to explode in such a way. You're going to grow. But if you're just going there and it's like, oh my gosh, why do I have to do this? And I was that kid. That's why I struggled through school until I found out the things that I liked, which was music and things of such. But school choice, I think, is definitely, we're living in a time now where we really need to explore a little bit more of that. And so anyway, so school choice, you're all for school choice.
I'm for school choice.
One of the things that I think we touched on it just a few minutes ago, but we sent about $500 million back to the town.
Right.
And, the people are probably scratching their head. Well, wait a minute. Where is it? Where is all that money? And it's hard for me to get across to individuals that if the state sends back $10 billion, it's up to your local representatives to dish it out, or to spend it, to utilize it, or allow for property tax relief. That's your local selectmen, your local aldermen, your local city councilors. Talk a little bit about that. What is your perspective on that? You served locally. When the city or when the state sends back a lot of money like that, do you go, ooh, now we can spend it on something? Or do you ever think about, hey, let's give some property tax relief?
Well, I think that's up to the community's local elected boards of leadership, whether it's a town council who is generally working with a town manager who's presenting a budget to them for final approval. And if you're a town, you're voting for that at the polling place sometimes, if you're an SB2 town, compared to a city where it tends to be more of a top decision.
What's an SB2 town?
An SB2 town, and that's a reference to the actual bill number. It was a Senate bill some sessions ago, and it's just a title that's stuck. Most of the legislators up there refer to bills by their assigned number. I personally can't do it. I was actually a math kid, but I can never remember a bill number, but SB2 is stuck. And what SB2 did, it said in your community where you do a town meeting, in my community in Goffstown, we still have a town meeting, but the town meeting used to be you all got together and did the final vote by hand or voice as to what you were going to do in your community. Some people thought that it would allow more people to participate by having that final vote be at the ballot box. And when you think about it, it allows people to come over the course of a day, or when constitutionally allowed to vote by absentee ballot, to put their choice on a ballot as compared to whether or not they're available on a Tuesday night or a Saturday
Right, because
morning.
not everybody could be there.
And
right.
so that was really the idea behind Senate Bill 2, was to get people the ability to vote on those things at the ballot box.
So you have the SB2 towns versus the other types.
The other types where they still go to a room and have the final vote in person.
Yeah. And so that's really up to the individuals to be involved with their community, to say, hey, look, where's this money coming from and what are we doing with it? And I think my property taxes are a little bit too high. Let's give some property tax relief in the next bill. But the people have to speak up. It's not the state. We send it back. It's your local representatives that you really need to talk to. As far as your aldermen, your selectmen, your city councilors, your city managers, get involved. Another issue that seems to be a really hot topic these days is the Second Amendment. We're seeing a lot of people out there saying, well, what's your stance on that? We're seeing shootings and on and on. And what is your stance on the Second Amendment?
I'm very pro Second Amendment. I have an A rating from the NRA, and I've been a gun owner for years.
Yep.
Obviously, the concerns people have are real. Things really are happening. And it is a natural instinct to want to do something in reaction to things that occur. And it would occur repeatedly. Without getting into the actual numbers and whether things are happening more or less or what's happening, the issue is really, if I'm entitled to bear arms and have a gun, when can it be taken from me without my ability to speak? That's really what we're coming down to.
Yeah.
As it is now, when you buy a gun, there are certain background checks that are done before you can buy a gun. Happens every time I buy one. Under a lot of the legislation that's coming forward, that changes from just having the checks when somebody purchases a gun to the ability to someone else to say, Barbara shouldn't have that gun.
Right, the red flag stuff, yeah.
And as an attorney, I have been part of many proceedings where people are able to sign affidavits as to conduct in things such as restraining orders against personal ability to move or take action are entered. Right? Many of us know people, unfortunately, who have had restraining orders entered against them for one reason or another. And as part of those restraining orders, guns are taken. And there have been some very tragic circumstances where restraining orders are granted, and the laws don't seem to stop violence from happening.
Right.
And it is a very difficult situation between protection of individual liberties and your ability to bear arms and somebody's ability to tell you you can't have one. Because I can tell you it is more often than not that the person with whom, at least my experience in New Hampshire, is that somebody makes a claim that they are unfit to bear arms and unsafe, that they lose their guns, they lose that ability to bear arms. The case against them is dropped in one way or another. And they have to then go through a process to get their guns back. It is not automatic.
And I don't think that's fair, because false allegations happen every day. And people can make a false claim against an individual for whatever reason. Could be out of bitterness, out of jealousy, out of fear. But you're limiting somebody else's rights based upon what's in your head. And there could be some legitimate cases, there's no doubt. But at the same time, your Second Amendment rights are being violated, and having to go through that hoop to get your guns back, that's a problem. There was a recent story about a young man. He was just in the mall, and he was bearing he had a gun, concealed permit, and he stopped a violent criminal. He killed somebody who was actually going around just going to do some more shooting. So he had the ability to protect lives bearing a gun. And you don't see a lot of these stories, but they seem to get buried, They don't fit a particular narrative. But a lot of my constituents are concerned about Second Amendment, and they want to make sure that we protect their rights. I mean, that's our job. And when we're in office, we're there to protect the liberties of individuals. That's my opinion. And I think I can back that up. But I think when we go after their rights to bear arms, that's personal property, and individuals that want to protect themselves, especially in today's climate. Why would you want to legislate against that? And not you, but I mean, there are individuals that want to do so. And I just heard a story today on the news about a congressman or senator who's being attacked with a knife. Somebody went after him with a knife.
Wow.
We should outlaw knives because they're sharp. But the interesting thing is, after this individual attacked the congressman, he was let out because there's no bail. How does that work? We're living in a weird time. But you can go after a congressman with a knife, and apparently, I forgot his name, but if somebody wants to do harm, they're going to do harm. They're going to do harm. And I think it's our responsibility to protect individuals' rights so that they can protect themselves. And I think you're on the same page with that.
I think I am, and I think that what you just talked about were a lot of great examples. First of all, the young man in the mall who acted on behalf of everybody else in the mall and took out an active shooter. It is my understanding he was trained in firearm use by his grandfather as a preteen teenager. He's an example of responsible gun stewardship in a family that clearly thought it was an important right. And I think that most gun owners, we know, and we know far many gun owners than we realize, because by far it's estimated that approximately half of households across the United States, and I suspect that's higher in New Hampshire, own firearms. We're responsible firearms owner. And so, there is a clear benefit to having that. And New Hampshire is one of the safest state, if not the safest state for gun violence in the country. And we, like the state of the young man who just adopted a concealed carry without a permit, we're safe, I think, because of that.
I totally agree. You never know who's carrying. So.
Right. It's like when I first moved to New Hampshire over 30 years ago, I didn't realize that everybody had huge families. I don't come from a huge family, and unfortunately, my family of origin, I am the only survivor. My parents and my brother are dead. But I learned very quickly that you never talk about anybody else really in front of other people, because they're always related or they know each other.
And it's a small state. I grew up in Nashua, and we had friends that actually lived off All Street, and they would go hunting with their big brothers and their uncles every year, and they all went to hunter safety. Oh, I wanted to go to hunter safety as a kid, but it was a religion with them. You carry that just a certain way. You go over. You had all these things that they were proud to be able to say, hey, I got I passed. I learned hunter safety, and I can go up north and go hunting. And that was taught in some of the schools. Why isn't that being taught in some of the schools? Hunter safety. Why not? Because everybody's afraid of these mass shooters? I don't know. What's changed in our society from back then till now? What has changed? Why are people so bent on hurting other people in such a way?
I think you need to have another show on that topic.
Well, we've touched on it before. But there's something wrong with our society where it's the will to kill that is the problem. Where is that coming from? What is pushing that? Is it all mental illness? Is it what we're watching on TV? Is it a breakdown of the family? What is the cause? I'm curious as to the why. Why are we at this stage in our country where people are flooding to come into our country through our borders? Why are we struggling with this? And like you said, it's something for another conversation. But getting back to that, what are your thoughts about the border? People that are coming in.
Well, we have the smallest seacoast border in the country, by the way.
Yes,
I think it's less than 20 miles. It's for a state that has a beach, we have the least amount.
Yeah.
Obviously, the southern border is a concern. We have people flooding across the southern border that frankly, I believe this year, if it's not already, it's on track to be more than the population of New Hampshire.
And the drugs that are coming with them, and the trafficking of children.
And the drugs and the children trafficking are not disputed. The border has been rated the most unsafe in the world. What's happening at the border is tragic. As a New Hampshire representative or New Hampshire senator, we really, unfortunately, do not have much control over that, but we can certainly, all of us, make our voices known to our federal delegation as to where we stand on it and make sure they answer our questions before we vote this year in the primary and the general election that are coming up in September and November.
So give us a quick pitch, if you want. If you can look at the camera and talk to the people in Goffstown and District 16. Tell us why they should vote for you.
Thank you, Senator. I'm running for Senate District 16 to bring my experience at the local level and in the State House over to the Senate. There are important issues, and I think my legal and local background will be a help in getting bills done and legislation for people that we can get to the finish line before session. I'm a supporter of lower taxes. I support the police. We didn't have a chance to talk about that, but I think the police are really the backbone of why New Hampshire is the great state that it is today. Election integrity is incredibly important, along with issues relating to parental rights. Parental rights are incredibly important because that really is our future. It's what are we doing for our children and bringing them forward. And I think that if I go forward in the Senate, I'll be able to bring that experience and work with senators like Senator Avard and other senators to make sure we get that legislation done for the people of New Hampshire.
And what's your website?
My website is griffin4nh.com. Please go to it, and you can learn a little bit more about the committees that I've served on and what I've been able to do here in New Hampshire.
Well, it's an honor that you came on the show and reaching out, and we appreciate all that you've done for New Hampshire and in your service, and we wish you the best.
Well, thank you so much, and good luck on your election too, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, if you like the show, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, just reach out to the candidates. And if you have any questions or you want to come on the show and talk about a political issue, you're very welcome. So until then, thank you for watching Speaking with the Senator.